Well, hello once again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of After Further Review with Mark Ferreira, John Pelkey, Jeff Taylor, our producer, with us as well. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I had my first Thanksgiving either at home or with friends in over a decade because usually I have a job on Thanksgiving Day. So for me, It was great. Hope yours was great. Lots to talk about today. Some really good football games coming up. The one football game we really looked forward to yesterday didn't happen. It's now scheduled to happen on Sunday, though that's still a little bit up in the air. And superstar players won't be appearing in that game.
A lot of talk of moving it to November 18th, John. I mean to game.
Wow, November 18th, 2021. They've become really flexible. We're going to play next year.
They are very cautious. They are very cautious. No, it's game 18, I should have said. And that's really ticking off a lot of the Steeler fans because, of course, right now they wouldn't have Lamar Smith. So it's one of those things. They're calling many Steeler fans calling the NFL cowards.
Yeah,
sound like you.
Actually, Lamar Jackson and not Lamar Smith, who is a former running back for the.
Did I say Lamar Smith?
Yes, you did. I'm not sure anybody has Lamar Smith, but frankly, maybe the Dallas Cowboys need him because I'm just going to say it here: Ezekiel Elliott, career over. All right, now before we get into any of that, also have a very interesting trivia question that I'll be interested if you guys could get because I was dumbfounded when I found out the answer to this. How was your Thanksgiving? Starting with you, Jeff, and then we'll get to Super Spreader. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was very fun. We had great food. We did I guess the redneck version of Skyline Chili the night before at my mother's house, and then we stayed there and then had turkey with the immediate family.
Very nice.
Yeah,
very nice.
It was great.
As I mentioned, I doubled up with my mother-in-law and her boyfriend. We had a lovely meal, and then we went over to some friends who are inside our bubble, but we all sat out. It was beautiful last night, sat outside. I ate a lot. My stuffing was a C-. So that's something that'll be difficult for me to live down because, as Mark knows, I don't have a shooter's mentality. So if I make a mistake, I basically want to hate myself into a grave for making that mistake.
You want to retire from public life every time.
I almost did that after a Stones concert. I should have done it. I should have retired from public life. And my my stuffing yesterday.
You're close again, right? Are you close to retiring from public life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how would that be any different from anything any of us are doing now? I mean, we have literally this year has retired me from public life.
That's true.
And frankly, it doesn't. Outside of not having enough money to pay our bills, there's really not a huge downside to it. I haven't had to come in contact with a lot of people.
Opposed to just losing all of our fortune.
Don't have to do a bunch of jobs I don't really care about anyway. You know, it's just so,
sure.
We'll see. Should have just, haven't written my novel yet, but we'll see. We'll get around to it. Mark and I we're going to get until next fall. All right, let's get a little bit into Mark Ferreira. Earlier, I texted you.
So you don't want to ask about my Thanksgiving?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, okay. Outside.
I get it. You're trying to protect me from the wrath of all of our woke friends. You're trying to protect me from that.
I am. So I appreciate that. Outside of setting back our recovery from COVID, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was great, John. He had Thanksgiving with Lamar Jackson and half of the Baltimore Ravens.
Really, Mark? You didn't go to the coast. You went to the Inner Harbor, didn't you?
I did. I went to, and Lamar Smith and I actually went into a corner, and he told me all of the secrets of
of those 2001 Dolphins.
Yes, exactly.
More.
Those days. No, it was my mom and dad.
Yep.
My daughter and her new husband, who might as well be a member of the family. He's grown up with us, basically.
Marky is a member of the family. I mean, by definition, if he is the son-in-law and grandson-in-law, he's actually a member of the family.
But he might as well be a member of the family in
blood relative, Mark. Is that what you're saying? A blood relative?
In long standing, it's like the SNL sketch with the Irish dating game. And everyone's a cousin. Oh, it's hilarious. And like the American is like, this should be over, right? No. You're way behind now. But we had and they had my nephew, his wife, and their two kids. And then my sister and her husband. So and really at the house it was just six of us, and then the other six came, and we were very careful in the airports, very careful on the airlines. We were careful driving in and careful at the top of everything, and then we just essentially decided that we were a unit for the remainder of the days, and had a great time. It was lovely. It was lovely to see everyone. And yeah, there's an element of risk, I suppose. Yes, that's true. And there's an element of fear, and there's an element of, what the hell are you doing? But clearly not enough to supersede coming out to California and enjoying my family.
You added everything up. You added everything up, and you said Thanksgiving weekend with the family, certain death, push. So there you go. I think that's
you roll the dice, Johnny. You roll the dice.
Well, what the hell? I mean,
you put it all on black if you have to.
To quote Pippin, I want my life to be something more than long, for God's sake.
There you go.
All right. So now let's go ahead and jump into this, because I texted you something earlier, Mark, that I swear to God, had you and I made it up as a joke, we would have never, ever thought, a little too on point, a little too on the nose. Nobody's going to buy this. Today, the Associated Press tweets this morning. Cowboys miss chance for NFC East lead with another home loss.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, they did.
Right.
But the obsession with it having to be about the Cowboys, and I would get it if it had been a game where the Cowboys, if it had been Joe Pisarcik fumbling at the end, a sure win that they fumbled away or, threw a pick six, but they were defeated 41-16, I believe. Was 41-16? 41-16 by the Washington.
Blown away.
Yeah, it wasn't even a close football game, but because of this obsession with, I guess, 70s nostalgia or early 90s nostalgia, we have to focus on the Dallas Cowboys, who, by the way, I think that's a bad headline.
Don't focus on them.
I think that's a bad headline, but they are struggling everywhere right now. There's no doubt about that.
I would say the reason for it, John, is your old mantra, follow the money. Something that we love to espouse in terms of why things happen and never actually do in terms of building, this podcast, for instance. People have done the analytics. People have figured it out, and eyeballs go to TV shows that talk about the Cowboys. Eyeballs go to tweets that talk about the Cowboys. Ears go to radio shows or podcasts that talk about the Cowboys. And we still don't get it because we don't get basic marketing. We don't get basic.
Well, what I don't get, Mark, I disagree. What I don't get is the chicken and the egg thing about it. Is it that we don't get it because of it, or is it the reason that it is that way is because people have always talked about them more than they deserve?
Well, I mean, the chicken and the egg argument is always a good one. Where did it start? How did it start? How does it perpetuate itself? But the fact is, over the last 25 plus years, it's perpetuated itself, despite the fact that the Cowboys have yet to reach the championship game in that amount of time. And I think have won 2, possibly 3 playoff games in that amount of time. It perpetuates itself because they've become a national brand, regardless. People love to watch them or love to hate watch them. Yeah. And regardless of how they do, that's the reality. It's the reality with the Lakers. It's the reality with the Yankees. It's the reality with, are there any other brands that are like that? Regardless of how well they're doing, people are going to follow. People are going to be interested. People are going to talk about it. And I agree. I hate it. It's ridiculous. They're 3-8. And oh, by the way, to your point, ignoring the story of a player who almost died as a result of this traumatically horrible injury, and a team that, oh, by the way, is in first place at 4-7, and legitimately their defensive line is in the top 3, if not maybe the best line.
They have the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, and you're right. Washington's defensive line is, if not the best unit in the National Football League, certainly among the best units, and they really showed yesterday that they can get pressure. Jack Del Rio has become very creative as a defensive coordinator and done a nice job there as well. Alex Smith, as you pointed out, he was comeback player of the year had they just inserted him for 3 plays earlier in the season.
Taking a snap.
But the team has played better under Alex Smith. He's playing actually quite well. Even the missing a couple of seasons notwithstanding, and it was frustrating for me. And it's not. I don't even hate the Cowboys anymore. I just think they're largely irrelevant most of the time. Let's focus on them just for a second, though, because
You're doing it.
Well, I want to ask you this
You're
because I always
kowtowing to the man, John. You're selling out. It's okay.
All right, I'll just make it.
Are you kidding? You know me. I'm much more likely to sell out than you are.
That's a good point. I seldom watch full football games, even Washington football team full football games, because again, they're in first place, they're 4-7, so it's not a day at the park watching. But I had an opportunity because I watched some of this before we went to our second Thanksgiving yesterday of 2, and then I'd recorded it. So I came home last night and I watched. I didn't know actually when I left it was halftime, and I didn't know they'd won until you texted me actually when I was at. And it wasn't a spoiler. I wasn't keeping it. I just thought, I'll find out and I'll watch the game. But what I was really struck by, and I said this before about Dallas, is that struggling in every phase of the game. Defensively, they seem out of position. Troy Aikman, who was insufferable doing the game, in my mind, yesterday, because he was focusing on everything was focusing on what Dallas was doing and what they weren't doing well. And honestly, I don't think he knew what the other team was playing. But then, of course, he's had a lot of concussions. But even he said at one point about the Dallas defense, he said it's just so apparent that people are out of position and struggling. And then the play calling is very questionable. The fake punt on the 4th and 10 was simply ridiculous, frankly. More important to me, it just seems like the players on that team are unfocused, undisciplined, and I question effort, and I hate to do that with professional athletes, but I just think
they're cowards. You're saying they're cowards.
They're moral cowards. I think maybe they are, Mark and Jeff. I think they are suffering by being the team that everybody focuses on, no matter what they're doing. Because I think it just swirls around guys, and I'm not 3-8.
There's a reason they're 3-8. You're bad in every phase of the game. You have bad coaching, and the players aren't into it. So there it is. And really,
they win the 3.
Exactly. That should wrap it up. That coaching staff is ridiculously behind the times and outdated. They do not have the team. They're 3-8. There's a reason why they're 3-8, because they're bad in every facet of the game. They have bad coaching. Players aren't into it.
The one thing I think, though, is I don't know that the coaching. I know they are somewhat to blame, but it seems like the leaders on that team are the problem. Dak Prescott, not exactly a guy that you think you can turn to as a leader, doesn't make great decisions. Ezekiel Elliott, another guy that seems to make weird decisions. There was all of the free agency surrounding both of those guys. It didn't seem like either one of them handled it specifically well. So is it a mishmash of both having guys at the top of your roster that are not that great of personalities and the coaching?
Well, I don't know if I agree on Dak, actually. Sorry, Mark, jumping in. I don't know if I agree on Dak. Ezekiel Elliott, I think, there are always questions about him. The bigger question about him is he's back to being the fumbling Ezekiel Elliott, and he's nowhere near the player that he was for a couple of years. Their offensive line is also not as good as it was when they started. But team leadership, because I've always said when I talk about effort, Mark, and both you and I have talked about this with guys that, coaches should not have to cajole guys into effort. You're professional athletes, and we read and hear all the time about the next man up phase, which is if you're not fully engaged and you're not putting forth the effort, there's somebody behind you who's probably younger and probably cheaper. Follow the money.
Well, Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott had a 13-3 season with the Cowboys. They had a 10-6 season with the Cowboys, and you can argue with not as good a personnel. They didn't have CeeDee Lamb, for instance, and they didn't have Amari Cooper for some of that.
The argument I would make for that, because I do understand that, but that was before they got paid. Once they got paid, they've done what guys that that get those big contracts and kind of fade away, and it was right after each other. So I think that could be potentially part of the problem.
Dak got paid this year, right? Dak got paid this year
coming into the season, yes,
and was having, at least statistically, one of the best seasons in the best season in his career, and one of the best seasons of any NFL quarterback before he got hurt. And I don't think anyone was blaming Dak for the losses early on. I think everyone was blaming that ridiculous defense that would, get down 42-0, and then Dak. Now, to your point, to some degree, a lot of those yards were garbage yards because they were down 42-0 in the second quarter, and all they did was pass. But I don't know if it's that. I think there's a distinct. You see 13-3, you see 10-6, you see 9-7, even last year 8-8, and then they get McCarthy in there and they get Nolan in there. Two guys that certainly Mike Nolan, and I believe Mike McCarthy probably was past his prime the last 3 years of his tenure in Green Bay.
It's fair.
And I just think that's, and I believe it's not just one thing, Jeff. I think you're right in the sense that all of it exacerbates the problem. And listen to us, we're still talking about the
I know. But it is
talking about a 3-8 team.
Right, let's stop that.
Bad in every phase in the game.
Before you stop, though, we forgot to mention one thing. Jerry Jones. Is he going to stick with Dak? Is he going to stick with McCarthy? Because when he seems to be at a point where a decision needs to be made, he almost always sticks to his guns. Yeah, and allows the fire to get out of control,
the mediocrity to continue. Yeah, I would say odds would be in favor of that, Jeff. Yes,
I think if you looked at those teams yesterday,
history.
I think if you looked at both of those teams yesterday, and you think that again, Washington's 4-8, but that comes with a bit of an asterisk, starting a second-year quarterback that things didn't work out, and
4-7, I think 4-7.
4-7, excuse me.
Come on now. That's
I was assured I know.
That keeps the red hot 4. That's the hottest 4-7 team we've ever seen.
Well, it could very well be. But Dan Snyder, outside of the accusations against him, for which I certainly hope, as should all good Americans, that he does hard time. He has really seemingly been out of the mix, putting Ron Rivera, who is, say what you want about Ron Rivera, yes, he never won a championship. People thought with Cam, maybe they should have gone back more, but he is as respected as anybody. And he's a guy going through chemotherapy and all this.
Damn good coach.
And yeah. And seemingly that team, and which has, you have to give them credit to, we talked about that defensive line. They got guys who would start for anybody up there. Montez Sweat is going to be a superstar and made a wonderfully athletic play. Ryan Kerrigan's been really good for an awfully long time. Chase Young looks like an outstanding draft choice and has bounced back well since his injury issues. But Dan Snyder's really stayed out of things, and I think that really benefits them, and I think that would benefit the Cowboys as well. Now, Jerry Jones is a little bit the mirror image, if a mirror is an opposite image, because he sticks with guys too long, and Dan Snyder has never allowed anybody really, maybe you could argue early on with Norv Turner when it was fairly obvious that just wasn't the thing. He stuck with him a little too long, but he was a rookie owner at that point. But I think I think both of those teams will benefit if their owners stay out of it. And I think right now, Dan Snyder is. The thing that I just want to say this about, when we went into this season, we said because of COVID and the fact that nobody's really going to be, you're not going to have your starting 22, really anybody. You don't anyway in the NFL, but it's going to be even more difficult this year with guys who may not even be injured or just because of contact tracing, they can't play. So we all said, there may be, the records this year, while they don't come with an asterisk, you can see there are some reasons behind those things. And if I was looking at the Cowboys and said, well, I think Mike McCarthy's trying some different things, knowing that even if they won the division, they're probably not going to win a playoff game. There are other teams in the NFC that are clearly better. It's my first year. I don't have to worry about being fired. God knows Jerry Jones is going to fire me. I'm afraid to hold on to me for too long. I would think then if I saw them doing some things that were creative and trying some different players, just anything. You saw the Washington football team run the fumble Ruski yesterday, which I thought was hysterical. But with Dallas, it just seems like, and I think, Mark, you hit the nail on the head. The game is beyond Mike McCarthy and Mike Nolan's thinking at this time. That's not saying they can't ever get up to speed, but I do think they're not up to speed right now. So It's, again, we've spent 23 minutes talking about them, at least 20 minutes talking about them. So
I would like to talk about your Washington football team, if I may.
No,
You brought up Dan Snyder.
that'll set up expectations. I want none
brought
of
up
that.
Dan Snyder. He's owned the team since '99,
Mhm.
and they've made the playoffs 4 times in his tenure. So this is the 22nd season. Last time they made the playoffs was 2012. They had to win their last 6 games to make the playoffs. They were 4-6, maybe even 7 games. I think they were 3-6 at one point.
Great run.
In 05 and 0,
right?
in 05 and no, in 2012 it was Shanahan, Mike Shanahan.
Oh, Shanahan, yes, okay.
And it was Robert Griffin III as well, his rookie year.
Yeah.
In 05 and 07, Joe Gibbs, in the midst of this pretty horrific run since Dan Snyder's had it, Joe Gibbs had the team for 4 years, got them to the playoffs twice. That's how good a coach Joe Gibbs is. But both of those times they got to the playoffs, they had to get hot in late November and in December. So they have not been in first place in late November. They have not been in first place in late November since 1999, since the first year Dan Snyder had it. But you also have to remember the last 3 times they've made the playoffs is them getting hot at the end of the season. And it feels like that's what's happening right now with this team. Alex Smith is getting his legs under him. Pardon the, horrific pun. But he is.
Completely true.
But he is. That defense is really coagulating, and Del Rio is taking advantage of that great line, because you can be creative when you have, when 4 guys can put that much pressure on a quarterback. And they're in a weak division. And it feels like a an 05, 07 or 2012 Redskin team that all of a sudden gets hot and somehow makes the playoffs. And that has been the case in the Snyder era. In 75% of the times the teams have made the playoffs up until this time. Of course, they only make the playoffs 25% of the time. Right. In Dan Snyder's era. So
yeah, it'll be that's a really good point. And all new coaching staff this year as well. So I had hoped that the team would look better at the end of the season than they did at the beginning of the season. And I think we're starting to see that. We'll see, because we talked about the Giants as well in that division, which is a team that plays hard every week. And they're
playing very well.
Philadelphia, who we all agree, if we saw the Carson Wentz of Pro Bowl era Carson Wentz, that may be the team that you would favor. But maybe the beast of the East is actually the Washington football team at this point.
Well, they've got to play the Steelers. They've got to play the Steelers. They play the 49ers, which should that could be 1-1. Then they play the Seahawks. That could be 1-2. Panthers. That's not an easy out. And then they play the Eagles. So they only have one intra-divisional game in their remaining 5. And so that may be the thing that prohibits them from getting in there. And I think the Giants now, who I think are really their biggest competition, because the Giants have the tiebreaker over the Redskins because the Giants beat the Redskins.
The Washington football team.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They play the Bengals, the Seahawks, the Cardinals, the Browns, the Ravens. Well, they all have a pretty tough schedule.
Well, here's the thing, though. John and I can both agree that the Washington football team fan Super Bowl has already been won with the sweep of the Dallas Cowboys in a season.
Absolutely.
We had a parade yesterday.
Yeah.
Social distance and masked, but we had a parade yesterday.
And I hate parades, but I had a parade for that. You know me, Mark. Both you and I hate parades.
We do. I can't stand parades.
No, that's what's going to happen in Disney. They fired all the performers, and they're going to bring back one long parade.
It's going to be one big parade.
It's going to start when the place opens, and it's going to go until it closes. You'll never be able to cross a street anywhere. So when you go into a park, you got to pick which side of the park you're going to hang out on.
They're doing one at the shopping center. They're doing a Santa parade at the Disney Springs Shopping Center. So it goes outside of the parks now. It's all parades all the time.
It'll be past the ESPN Club. They'll go through the ESPN Club. That will be the only entertainment on the boardwalk is the parade.
All right. Well, enjoy, people, if that's the sort of thing you're into. All right. We're going to take a break, and I want to throw this trivia question out, and then we'll get back. We'll talk a little about college football, but I think NFL is mainly going to be the story of the day. But I want to throw out this trivia question. Here you go.
And full disclosure, Jeff and I have not even been told it thus far.
Nope. Very simple question. Mark's was a little more esoteric, which we loved on Wednesday. It was a fun question. But my question for you is, folks, this is simple. It's a Googleable thing. Please don't do that. Please, Tom Brady, if you're listening, any member of the New England Patriots, just please.
Have some honor.
Yeah,
Have
honestly,
some
for the love
honor.
of God, it's a holiday weekend.
Please.
Jeez. What is the oldest professional football franchise in America? That's my question. What is the old? I know who I thought it was, and I think it's probably one of two teams that you all think that it is as well. And it's not. And it was very surprising to me. Very, very surprising.
All right, so it's not the Chicago Bears. This is a typical guess at the ESPN club. It's not the Chicago Bears, right?
Yeah, because that's a win-win. Because if it was the Chicago Bears, I'd go, actually it was, and you'd go, I won. And if it wasn't, I'd go, no, and you go, see, I knew that.
Right.
Yeah, that's the. But you have to do it like they're walking to the bathroom. So let me see if I can do this on camera. It's not Chicago Bears. Isn't the Bears, is it? I know it's not the Bears.
Lenny didn't ask it as a question. He made it as an answer.
Yeah, nope, not the Bears. It surprised me. Very, very surprising.
Can I ask one question before I make my guess?
Only if it's in Latin.
Has this team been in the same city the entire time?
No.
Is it the Baltimore Ravens?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Is it somehow before 1920?
It is. I said the oldest professional football organization.
Yeah, so it predates the National Football League.
It does predate the National Football League, as do the Green Bay Packers, actually, who it is also not.
Manchester United.
It is. That's not that type of football.
Oh, my bad.
American football. That's right.
How about this, John? This is the last question from me. Is the nickname of the team the same?
It is.
Okay, good.
It is. Yeah. Now, see, that's too many clues.
I know. We asked.
You Claremonted me. You Riley'd me. You gave away too many clues. Whereas I was always accused of being too esoteric and making them too difficult. And all right.
And like always, I tried to
undercut me.
I tried to ride the middle between the two of you guys.
Is there a baseball team with the same name?
I'm not answering any more of your questions, either of you. All right. So let's jump back into the NFL and just briefly the games yesterday. We mentioned the one we were all looking forward to, Steelers-Ravens, because of COVID issues, has been moved to Sunday. Lamar Jackson, as well as Lamar Smith, not available for that game. Jackson because of COVID, Lamar Smith because he retired a decade ago. Lenny's question, Lenny has guessed, and he has half of that is correct. The other half is not. The Texans and the Lions, I had mentioned this, and I think we saw some of this yesterday, is the Texans are not going to go to the playoffs, but they're a team that's going to be a difficult out for people. I think that, after the firing of their head coach, I think they've come together a little here later. And again, and with Deshaun Watson, they're always going to be difficult. But just one quick question on the Lions, and we've talked about Matt Patricia. He inherited a team that's now worse than when he inherited it. I am generally not in favor of firing a coach in the middle of a season, but Joe Conley, longtime listener, actually yesterday after that game sent me a text and said, does he survive? I just want to get your opinion on that. The Fords are not the people who make, those decisions quickly, but boy, it really does appear with that team that they are just, even in games that that just looks like they need a change and a change quickly to me.
I don't think there's any doubt that he'll be gone at the end of the season. What is Dan Quinn and Bill O'Brien? Are those the two that have been fired in the middle of the season this year? Has there been?
Yes, they have.
That's it, right?
That's it so far. Yeah.
I'm not sure what it buys the Lions at this point in time necessarily, except just to get a head start on everything. But in other words, they could start talking to Jim Harbaugh, for instance, if they want. And I don't know if that's necessarily, I don't know all the ins and outs of whatever those rules are that you can't tamper. I'm not sure if, talking to a head coach of a college football team that it's clearly has nothing to play for.
That sounds like it wouldn't be tampering with anything.
Well, no, because it's not within the same league. So I think for that reason, if they wanted to get a head start, to start talking to Jim Harbaugh, for instance, which I think would be a natural fit, seemingly, then I think that would be the only reason to get rid of him now, because it's not going to do it's not going to help the Lions this season. What it's going to do is just, get rid of the dead weight. They did that with Mike Singletary with the 49ers, the last game of the season. They fired him before the last game of the season. And I think it was they had just been disqualified from the playoffs in the previous game, because that was the year Seattle won at 7-9, and the Niners had a chance to make the playoffs because that division was ridiculously bad, and he couldn't even do that. So they were just angry and they fired him. And then I think they did have a head start getting Jim Harbaugh. So yeah, I could see him being fired. I think they should fire Mike McCarthy too. I mean, it's ridiculous. Lenny points out, Mike McCarthy minus Aaron Rodgers equals Dallas this year. Mike McCarthy minus Aaron Rodgers equals 3-8. With a team that a lot of people before the season, let's not forget this. And yes, they lost Dak. But they, people were celebrating the signing of Andy Dalton in the offseason as, what is the best backup quarterback there is? And, they had a great roster. I think I picked them to go at least to the championship game. I know Joe picked them to win the Super Bowl. Joe Connolly, of course, that's delusional Dallas fans. I noticed he's not on the show today. He's not with us today on the show. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it doesn't, I'll just go back to my original point. It doesn't buy Detroit anything in the season, but it might buy them time to go after the coach they want and have some time to woo that coach before the onslaught of other teams woo that particular
And I'll
coach.
argue this as well. It might give the front office, and I don't know enough about their front office to know whether or not the people there need to go as well. I apologize for that, but you wonder, keeping you up, Mark?
Yeah,
I'm wondering if
I thought I was going to make it. But I wasn't present enough. I wasn't mindful enough to hide the yawn.
Just duck out. Do it like you're guessing on a progressive trivia.
Yawn.
Right there. Yeah.
Yawn.
It might give the front office, if indeed that they're not going to do a whole house cleaning, it may give the front office an opportunity to see if perhaps addition by subtraction, if they remove the presence that is Matt Patricia, that perhaps they see better results out of the team. They see guys that maybe he is such a distraction, and everything that we've read recently is that players don't like him. He early on didn't treat people with respect, and then he carried in. And I think this is something that we've all seen working for big. I know all of us have worked for a number of the same entities, and you see where somebody will come in who was a part of a successful endeavor, a smaller part of a successful endeavor, and come into another endeavor and act as if they have all of the answers because they were a part of this. And they said with Matt Patricia, he came in acting like this is the New England way, and the way. The only way you can play and the only way we're going to win. And when that didn't translate within the first handful of games into success, the one thing that makes people want to play for Bill Belichick, who we all agree is not an easy guy to play for, is the success. He gives them wins. And when you're not doing that, Charlie Weiss, Josh McDaniels, you've seen that from guys with New England that have approached things seemingly in that same way, and it just hasn't worked out. Colin Cowherd, however, believes it's because he wears his hat backwards. So we'll put that on there as well. All right, I want to reiterate our trivia question and then move a little bit to college football. Just briefly, we'll circle back to the NFL and games this weekend and give us our locks and shocks. I want to talk about two games. Derek Abbott was going to join us and was unable to. We'll hopefully get with Derek next week to talk a little bit more about things as we move forward. The biggest game of note for this weekend is, again, Alabama and Auburn. I think it is the only game between two top 25 ranked teams this weekend, which is odd over a Thanksgiving weekend. You usually do better than that, but some of our usual suspects are having down years. Nick Saban tests positive for COVID for a second time, right? The first time was a false positive. Was it a false positive?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
But this time he tested too late to, I think, to even make it back for this game if he wanted to. So he won't be there. you asked me the question, Mark, on Wednesday, but I want to circle this one back to you. Any concerns for Alabama, who I think we all agree are head and shoulders above Auburn as a football team? Do you have any concerns that the loss of Nick Saban for a game like this, it is a rivalry game? The underdog in this game they're on both sides. The underdog in this game have surprised people year in and year out. But are you expecting anything different from Alabama without him?
Well, I think what the difference is we'll get if it is a tight game, if it is a surprisingly close game and Auburn is playing fired up because of the rivalry, and it's one of those wacky years where a team that has no business beating another team is in the game. We've talked about this. Game time coaches. Saban's a good one.
Yeah, he is.
Saban is a very good one. He's exhibited that, and the most obvious one was switching quarterbacks in the national championship game, and
Sure.
it working. Even though, what was it, Tua threw a interception, his first pass,
Yes.
and I think it might have been even a pick six, if I'm not mistaken. But he stuck with him, and it worked. So I think Saban is a great game time coach. So if that's the case, if inexplicably Auburn is in a tight game, you don't have a guy on the sidelines to manage that as well as you would with Nick Saban. But outside of that, the other part of Nick Saban as a great coach is building this great program, having these great kids, having great recruiting systems and results, having a great coaching staff. So all of that's going to be fine. But if it is a tight game, you need a good game time coach, then it might affect it.
Yeah. Now, he's also been involved in a couple of games where he was unable to make those adjustments. I go back to the Johnny Manziel Texas A&M team that beat an Alabama team. Now, that was kind of, Manziel had that Doug Flutie thing where he was a sort of a one-man team. I mean, they had talent, certainly, but probably won games that they probably shouldn't have won. And then also famously, the Cam Newton comeback, which was pretty remarkable. But then you're talking about, I don't think.
Yeah.
Auburn doesn't have any magical, no offense, they've got good football players, but they don't have that. I don't think they have that sort of magic. I did misspeak, though. There is one other top 25 game, and that, as we talked about it a little, was Notre Dame and North Carolina. Now, the game is in Chapel Hill at 3:30 this afternoon, so we will know something about that early. Traditionally, I would worry about Notre Dame in this sort of a game. Because I always worried about them going south and playing teams that are faster. But I've stayed on this, and I'm going to stay on this now. That Notre Dame team that we're seeing this year is more athletic than Notre Dame teams in the past. And when they got beaten, they got beaten by teams that were more athletic and more agile because they were always big up front. They could always pound at you. They were smart. But they lack speed and in some cases agility. I don't really worry about them against North Carolina where I would have in the past.
So Iowa State and Texas are playing right now.
Oh, that's another. See, look at that. I'm missing them all. That's a top thing.
And that's another one between 17 and 13, but it's between two Big 12 teams and no one cares.
Right. And there's 17 and 13. The others at least have a top 10 team involved in it, though Iowa State's one of those teams that sneaky always upsets somebody, and both of these teams, I believe, have the same record, or Texas is a half game better, I think, having played one more game.
I just feel like it's so interesting to me because oftentimes, and I don't know if you guys feel this way, but oftentimes college football seems to be more exciting than the NFL during the regular season.
Always.
Certainly for stretches of the regular season, college football always seems to be more exciting. And then as we get into late November, this time of year, essentially, college football becomes boring because they've stopped playing each other and they're waiting for their inexplicable 75 different bowl games. And it's
74. There was one canceled, Mark. I was going to drop that on you. I want to leave you with a happy thought. I'll tell you. Canceled? We'll get to it later. We'll get to it later. Don't want to bury the lead.
We won't bury the lead, but it seems to be the opposite this year. I'm more interested in the NFL. The NFL, we talk about the AFC. There's 9 teams in there that are 6-4 or better. The NFC, we have no idea who's the best team.
Well, we
have a good idea in the AFC. The NFL seems a lot more exciting, and week to week with college football, John, it doesn't seem to be that many cool matchups.
Well, I I think there's a couple of things going on there. Yeah, because you have fewer games, you didn't get some of the intersectional matchups that you liked, and even within conferences, you don't have teams that are that traditionally highly ranked teams that end up playing one another. The other thing is that the NFL is different this year. There are more teams in the playoffs. The playoffs themselves are formatted differently. They may even be formatted they may be adding teams to the playoffs depending on what happens moving forward. So I kind of agree with you there. I think because college football is largely the same in and of the fact that I do believe that for me, I find it more interesting because you have a lot more diversity with offenses and defenses and in teams and levels of talent. You have so much parity in the National Football League that the games, there is a little bit of a sameness involved in that. So I would agree. I would say, and college football is my favorite sport, but it has been a little less exciting. It also, the Big Ten starting later, the Pac-12 still not seeming like it's involved in any of this, and it may not be really when push comes to shove involved with very much. But I would agree with that. I think that the NFL this year is much more interesting than it has been in a while, regular season wise. And college football is not. I will now tell you, Mark. I want to make you happy. There's one fewer bowl game, so I think the fortunes of Illinois State and Delaware may be that they don't find themselves in a postseason game. And I know your feelings about that, given that Delaware runs the Houston Veer, and that amoeba defense of Illinois State doesn't generally play well against them. The Pinstripe Bowl, Mark, the New Era Pinstripe Bowl, which is played in Yankee Stadium. So once again, the New York Yankees ruin everything. That game was scheduled for the 29th of December, and it has been canceled. And I think you might see more of that moving forward.
Brother, yeah, man, whatever.
You should be happy.
I don't want a game in New York City that's called the Pinstripe Bowl that at least can refer to the Yankees. So there's something that's actually seemingly legitimate about it, as opposed to the tulip, the Weed Whacker Tulip Bowl from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know I'm giving away my coastal elitism when I say these kinds of things, but I am a coastal elite. Who's kidding who?
Yeah, you really are.
And so that's the one that gets canceled. Of course it does. Any gathering of two or more is canceled in New York City. I believe that's the latest edict. Where two or more are gathered, you're canceled. Rewrite that verse in the Bible. Where two or more are gathered, I am not among you.
I was going to say they could play it in a church though now.
Yes, they could. They could actually. They should do that.
Oh, that's true.
They should actually.
Yeah,
Then it would be the New Testament Pinstripe Bowl as opposed to the New Era Pinstripe Bowl. See, you don't even have to really change the marketing. You could cross out Era and write Testament, be funny little T-shirts. Yes, I'm 100% for it. And it should be, I don't know, Loyola versus pick another Jesuit school or
Liberty.
Liberty. Hell, hey, they might get a better bowl than that, frankly. And that's a pretty decent story. Also, in my never-ending desire to figure out ways that the Pac-12 can get into the championship game,
I know you really have a strong, passionate desire for that.
I do. I really want. I want a Pac-12 team to get in there.
Oregon's going to let you down, dude. I'm telling you that.
I know
Oregon is nothing but a place to go to be let down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of high expectations, and it's not
really. That's the very Californian of you. Because I think there's probably a thing where California and Washington probably look at Oregon and go, that's the demilitarized zone.
It's the meat in the middle, buddy.
Bunch of crunchy hippies. Yeah, it should. Yeah, I agree. Oregon, I've never even been there, and I think it's better than practically every state I've ever been in. Wow. Maybe because I've never been there. But I've been dealt a blow, Mark, because they're the only other team in the Pac-12 with a shot would be USC, and their game against Colorado has been canceled. They're saying canceled
because it was in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. Yep. Let's see.
Where two or more are gathered, you can't exist.
Yep. Yeah. So I hold out hope for Oregon that for once they could surprise us all, and we'll find out tonight. They play Oregon State in what I believe is called the Civil War. Oregon State.
Maybe a little foreshadowing for the entire country.
The entire country. All right, fair enough. All right, I'm good for it. So, all right, so that's college football. Let's give you the one more time the trivia question. The trivia question was.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
About the trivia question.
Sure.
Is the city the difference in the name that Lenny brought up?
Well,
you said it's partial different. There's something is the same and something is different. Is the difference the city?
And I kind of made that what I said was a bit misleading. Neither of the names that he said are correct, but the city itself is correct.
Okay.
The city itself is the city within which this professional football organization, the very first one, founded in the 19th century.
Wow.
Wow. I tell you, I was incredible. I thought I knew a lot about football history. I really thought I was on top of all of that stuff. But this one was a surprise. This one was a big surprise. All right, so that has
the same nickname as a current NFL franchise.
Well, it did not initially, but once it acquired the nickname has been the same throughout.
But did it acquire the nickname prior to the entry into the National Football League?
It did.
I think I know the answer to this now. Am I allowed to guess?
Let's go through one more. Segment, and then I'll let you guess before I give the answer away. All right. On to our potpourri section, Mark.
Can't wait.
It is always your favorite part of this entire thing. Let's start with, because we don't really have a lot outside of NFL. Let's be honest, outside of NFL football and college football. I will say, to start though, I want to send out congratulations to Robert Ferreira, your father, who set the bar very high. We'll leave it there.
Now,
you've always said that. My dad set the bar so educator, master's degree. Just
no, a PhD.
PhD overachiever.
PhD. He was the valedictorian of his college, for crying out loud. It's one thing to be a valedictorian of your high school. It's another thing to be a valedictorian of your college.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a PhD. I'm sorry. It's just, it goes on and on and on and on. He is superintendent of 3 major urban districts in his career, which is a big job. He's still currently teaching at a college, virtually, of course, at this point in time. But it's remarkable. It's a bar that no one could possibly, certainly someone like me, could ever possibly hope to.
Did he have to teach his classes from the basement on Wednesday?
No, because his classes are off this week. Because they observe normal routines, unlike sports talk podcasts listened by 7 people.
I know. Until you texted me yesterday, I was thinking, we're not doing a show on Friday, are we? Because, we don't really talk about those things. And who knows? Well, it's interesting that you brought up his alma mater, the University of San Francisco, which was a basketball program of note when your father was there. And for some time afterwards, one of the greats.
Yeah.
And they relived a bit of their glory today, Mark, because in the bubble championship tournament down in Fort Myers, Florida, they upset the number 4 Virginia Cavaliers, 61-60.
The USF Dons.
The Dons defeated the
Virginia Cavaliers.
The Virginia Cavaliers.
The reigning national champions, right?
Yeah, because there was none this year. Right. So, yeah.
So how about that? Yeah. When my dad was a freshman, Bill Russell and Casey Jones were seniors at the University of San Francisco. Yeah.
It was one of the best. I mean, they had a really, really good athletic program.
And they won a national championship. Yeah.
Yeah. And football too. They had a terrific athletic program. But then they de-emphasized athletics at a point, football certainly at a point. And they've had a couple of seasons, I think, where they still have decent basketball talent. But congratulations to Bob Ferreira. That's my start for the potpourri. My second part, and then we'll jump into anything that you want to talk about, Mark, is I think we should do our locks and shocks.
Yeah, good call.
Do you have yours presently, or would you like me to start?
I think you can start with if you want to start with your lock, or if you want to start with your shock. That's fine.
Okay, I want to start with my lock, and my lock is I just wanted to see what their my lock was the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Baltimore Ravens. I picked this as my lock for two reasons. The absence of Lamar Smith being at the top of those reasons,
Right?
the absence of Lamar Jackson and the still in my mind 50-50 chance the game won't be played, so I won't get my lock wrong. But I do believe that if they played, and I would also say that if they played with Lamar Jackson, I still would say that Pittsburgh was a lock in this game. I think Baltimore's on a bit of a free fall.
They are. My lock is Miami over the New York Jets. I'm not sure why it's only 7 points. Maybe it's because they're in New York and the Dolphins historically
little unsettled at quarterback. The Dolphins right now as well. Little unsettled at quarterback.
I suppose I would be very surprised if Tua doesn't get the start.
You are doing something very sketchy here, Mark, because you're expecting the Jets to do something right and lose to the Dolphins so they can guarantee themselves Trevor Lawrence. But they're the Jets, so they're going to win against Miami, opening up the door for another team to get the number one pick.
I think it's a reason that they're not going to fire their head coach. I think they're afraid they'll catch lightning in a bottle, and they'll be one of those teams that fires their head coach and wins their last 4 games and then ends up with the 3rd pick and gets that cornerback for Wisconsin or whomever, lineman from Iowa. I think that's one of the reasons that Gase is keeping the job, frankly.
I'm going to do a quick sidebar right now. Quick sidebar that has to do with our picks, and that is this. If the Jets do get the number 1 pick, if you're Trevor Lawrence, do you just stay for your senior year? I would.
As long as he doesn't hire an agent.
I'll go to anyone else besides the Jets.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go to that team.
But he has to declare for the draft, right? But as long as he doesn't hire an agent.
Yes.
But I think there's a pullout time, though. I don't think you can like go and get drafted and then go, ooh.
No, but I'm saying if December, I mean, we're going to
they have the first pick. He just says no.
Yeah, I mean, to Jeff's point, we may know in a week or two for sure if the Jets have the number 1 pick, and he can just go, you know what? After careful consideration, I'm going to play with Clemson my senior year, and that's gonna get them all fired up and maybe
Dabo Swinney
national championship.
Is a huge Dolphins fan this weekend.
Yeah, he really is. Dabo Swinney is like offering to coach all of the teams that are playing the Jets for the next couple of weeks. Anything you need to know, I'll come in. I'll make it.
I read
work.
his blog. He's really big on Adam Gase right now. He's really think he's going to pull it out.
I think he's going to turn it around. I really, really do. And I tell you what, I wouldn't blame him. I wouldn't blame him one bit. I would not blame him one bit. I go back to John Elway, and at the time, growing up in the D.C. area, and I wasn't a Colts fan, but I mean, you kind of, they're a local team. They're in the AFC. Kind of followed them. But when Elway said he didn't want to go and play there, I kept thinking, that's what a jerk. Go play baseball. And then, because it was Frank Kush he didn't want to play for, and I think Frank Kush's record proved that he made a good bet there. And then the fact that the team got up and moved to Indianapolis 20 minutes after the draft, probably a good move on his part. So I would be in favor of it if I were Trevor Lawrence, though he will be a bust. There is still no doubt in my mind. All right, my shock, Mark,
yes, sir,
is I think Atlanta is going to beat Las Vegas.
I knew you were going to. That was mine.
Questionable road favorite?
That was mine. Yes. I all of a sudden it was like seconds before you said that. I think he's going to say it. He's going to say the Raiders.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's one of those, first of all, questionable road favorites.
Yep.
Atlanta has had times where they have played well. They haven't been able to put all of that together. Vegas coming off a big win that kind of introduced them, I think, to a lot of people. We got to see a little bit more of them. And more importantly, we've talked really, really highly. We've spoken highly of them, and that will doom anyone. So that is why my shock is I think Atlanta takes care of Las Vegas.
All right. So I think we are jumping off not that New England has any bandwagon, but I think we've written them off, and we might have written them off too early. I think they still have spoiler within them.
Yep.
Arizona's traveling all the way across the country, so that's a possibility, but I'm not going to go with that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what I've done all year, and this is probably a guarantee that I'm going to be wrong. I've gone against Indy a lot, and then when I've gone for them, they've lost. I was against Tennessee the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to go for them, and that's when they started to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever I pick in this game, It's just go with the opposite. But I think Tennessee will upset Indianapolis.
Both of the two games that you mentioned were games that I thought about because I agreed with you with New England because I think, there are those games where Bill Belichick defensively can scheme to such an extent that it just befuddles good teams even.
Yeah.
And I think offensively, Cam, they can do some things with Cam to particularly with running the football and playing a little bit of that RPO stuff that they could keep Arizona's offense off the field. And Arizona, while we still like them, they are still young and they are inconsistent and they had to go East Coast. So I like that a lot. And yeah, Indy and Tennessee maybe the game of the week in many respects. But that to me, that's a push. And I wanted to ask Derek Abbott this, so I'll ask you, Mark. What I see with Tennessee particularly, and why I like Tennessee in this game, is they are the absolute opposite of the Dallas Cowboys. Is I look at them and I just see a lot of guys who play with a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
And what can be seen at times of overconfidence, playing teams that are probably better talent-wise, though I think Tennessee's got a lot more talent than people know. They're just not one of those franchises you think of. But they've won games or in part because of clock management of their coaches. I don't think you can look at any Mike Vrabel games where you specifically look at them as we are, like Mike McCarthy right now and some other guys, and say, boy, coaching decisions late really costs them. I don't think they get anywhere near the respect that they deserve. They are not a flash in the pan, and I just think that team
Obviously
has
not.
a belief.
And I'll tell you, it's easy to jump off their bandwagon and not very easy to get on their bandwagon. It's just the case. You have to be reluctantly lifted onto the bandwagon to be part of it. And boy, oh boy, the first sign of trouble, people are diving off that thing. And I count myself as one of those. But they are led by Indianapolis and Tennessee, led by two really of the best head coaches, in my opinion, in the National Football League, and two ex-players who really know how to motivate their team. And to your point, it's the opposite of Dallas. They're playing higher than they're overachieving. Yeah. They're playing higher than their ability. They're playing as a team. They're truly playing team football, which is where you have the most success. But I think they're gonna get by Indianapolis. I think it probably will be a great game. And the stakes couldn't be higher. It's for first place. The stakes, believe it or not, were as high as they were yesterday between the Washington football team and the Dallas Cowboys playing for first place. This is literally playing for first place.
It's the Thanksgiving weekend of first place play-in games, I guess. All right, let's go ahead and we'll answer our trivia questions. Jeff, what was your guess?
The Chicago Zephyrs?
It was not the Chicago Zephyrs. Chicago is actually the city in which this football team was founded. But in 1898, they were actually founded as the Morgan Athletic Club. And then in 1920, they moved to Racine. And they were the Racine Cardinals, even though Morgan Athletic Club started in Chicago. And then they became the Chicago Cardinals, which is what we, for those of us who know some football history, that's where the first name we remember, because I didn't know the Racine. I knew that the Chicago Bears were the Decatur Staleys, but they were actually not the Chicago Cardinals in the NFL until the NFL's third season in 1922.
But the genesis of that Cardinals organization that goes all the way to Kyler Murray right now started in 1899 or whatever you
1898 as the Morgan Athletic Club, the first professional American football team.
And they were and they had a successful run all the way to the time they moved to Racine, is what you're saying. They were a professional club the entire time.
Yes, they for 122 years they have been a professional football club.
Wow.
And that says more about, we talk about how long it's been since Cleveland's run a championship and everything. Boy, you look at the Cardinals and how long they've been alive. Yeah. What success they've had in that 122 years. It's pretty minimal.
It is.
It's pretty minimal.
The best
went to a Super Bowl with Kurt Warner.
Should have won it.
Yeah, that was
lost it on maybe the second or third best catch in the history of a Super Bowl game, throw and catch.
And throw, yeah, exactly. There's no doubt about it. That was a great
football
Super Bowl game. That was one of the best Super Bowl games I've ever seen. And Kurt Warner, that got him into the Hall of Fame. The fact he got that Cardinals team into the Super Bowl, beating all those other teams that particular season in '08. When there are a lot of other teams that were more heavily favored. As a matter of fact, remember that was the Jake Plummer, not Jake Plummer, Delhomme. That was Delhomme's Carolina Panthers team that were lights out that season. And Delhomme was never the same after the Cardinals upset them in '08 that year. So, yeah, you're right. That's really a lot of fun. I do have a soft spot for the Cardinals, and I certainly have a soft spot for Kyler Murray, and I think he's I'm rooting for them. Of all the teams in the NFC West, if it's not the Niners, I'd like it to be the Cardinals.
Interesting tidbit on Kurt Warner. He's also in the grocery bagging Hall of Fame.
He is.
First year anonymous inductee.
And frankly, I think if there were an Arena Football League Hall of Fame, he'd actually be in the Arena Football League Hall of Fame. Breaking news before we get out of here: Ravens-Steelers game now been moved to Tuesday. It's now been moved to Tuesday after the Buster Posey like whining of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know when we get we're 9-0. Good God.
Does that get Lamar Jackson back into that game?
I think that pushes the timeline back enough that Lamar Jackson could be.
Oh, see, that's stupid. That is lame. Come on now. You got to play without your players if that's the case.
Yeah, well, it goes back to, it's funny that the Steelers are part of this because, the Steelers loss in the AFC Championship game to, or it might have been a divisional game. Might remember more than I had, Mark, to Oakland in '76. They came into that game.
It was a championship game.
They came into that game without either Franco Harris or Rocky Bleier, their starting backfield. And to this day, the Pittsburgh guys will say, well, I mean, honestly, come on. And Phil Villapiano will famously say, you bring the players that you have. That's how it works. But apparently not in today's NFL. We'll move the game so you have the players that you want.
Yeah, I mean
the Jets have actually petitioned the NFL not to play any of the rest of their 2020 games until they've drafted Trevor Lawrence. So we'll see if the commissioner will sign off and the rest of their season will be played next summer.
No, and all next season because Trevor Lawrence will sit out and unfortunately will still get drafted number 1 by the Jets.
It's actually a lawsuit that's in pending in federal court. It's Sweeney v. New York Jets.
Sidney Powell leading the way on that one as well. Doing
very
nice.
Job.
So Pittsburgh's 10-0, and you're right. It's a little shady. Now I will say this: I think there are 12 players on the Ravens who have tested positive.
Yeah, no,
they may not even be able to field a team.
It's gotten to that point because they have had more people come down with it, and I actually think it is in an abundance of caution because they're still, as people test, then they have to extend the contact tracing and everything. It's very difficult. And again, I'm going to give we don't give Eddie Goodell. That's right. That's it. Eddie Goodell. Eddie Goodell. We don't give him. Haven't done Goodell in a while. What do you want? Why are you talking about me? Evil Roger Goodell.
Spoiler alert.
Not enough. Spoiler alert. I should have said spoiler. It's an old bit from the old radio show. But I think they have been pretty agile with this stuff up to this point in time. As we get later in the season, it's going to become more difficult. And really, my question right now, and this is really one of the bigger questions I have for the NFL, is will we get to the end of the season and will there be teams that played fewer regular season games than other teams? And I think if you got a Detroit New York Jet game for 17th, or you just roll the dice. Whoever gets the loss,
forget it. Why risk it? Risk it?
What's the point? Put on a repeat of Jake and the Fat Man. More people will watch it.
Or Heidi.
Just start. They start every Jets game at and then 4 minutes in, just cut to Heidi. Every single one. Different productions of Heidi.
I have a potpourri tidbit. There is a new Heidi on Netflix. I think it's a television show, Heidi.
Perfect.
So it's perfect. Just episodically, you could just dump it into the middle of Jets games.
I think there's 16. I think they made 16 episodes for that very reason.
And Trevor Lawrence actually has a recurring role on Heidi, just to shove it to them.
He's playing Heidi.
He could play Heidi or a shepherd. He could do both. I mean, it's that kind of era we're in right now.
All right. Anything else before we get to this weekend that you feel you need to touch on?
There is not.
Mark, when are you headed back? I want to know when the germs head east.
that's something we have to do. I am going to test when I get back out. I tested before I left. I'm going to test when I get back out. And but I am flying all day Monday. As you know, John, when you fly from West Coast to East Coast, you jump further in time because you gain 3 hours. So my flight leaves at 11:15.
It shortens your life. It shortens your life.
It does. It does. You're going to have to cross the international date line the other way a few times to get it back.
Yeah.
But I'll be in the air the entire our entire showtime. Now, unless we want to do a show, because I have to get to the airport by about 9:45.
Your
Our time. That's 12:45. So I could do we could do a 10 o'clock show.
So
we could do a 10 a.m. show, and I would be doing it at 7 a.m. my time, and it would be a 10 a.m. Eastern time show on Friday. That'd be the only time to do it, though.
I would say all of our listeners could guess, but I assume Lenny's going to say, let's do that. And since that's the only person who's paying any attention to what we're doing right now, since all the people in your family who normally would do it are now in some sort of a stadium seating where apparently in front of you. And the reason that you're so scattered and not paying attention to me is because you're playing to the crowd. Look at him right there, just playing to the crowd. Am I right? Am I right, family?
You've been
great.
Have I been? Do I feel a little scattered today?
Not at all.
Jeffrey?
No. Are you asking me? Because I was certain there was nobody in that room, because if there were other Ferreras in that room, they would have been applauding at multiple occasions during the show.
Yes, you would have heard them. You would have heard the studio audience that you heard on Monday. But yes, we could do a 10 a.m. Eastern time show. 7 to 8 would work for me, and I would just do it from my mom and dad's place. And Lenny is available anytime. It's amazing. Joe Connolly not here. He could not face the wrath.
No,
he could not. He couldn't. And we love Joe, but he's not obligated like Skip Bayless is obligated to do the show. And he was
Skip's a little Bruce Dern right now. Skip's going a little Bruce Dern, man. He just looks beaten down. I've never seen a person who makes millions of dollars on a television show as joyless as he is at all moments in time. I just assume that Bayless must have like every paycheck on the Cowboys, and that just from week in and week out, he's so now behind the times. Yeah. He's like, I don't know. He's like a rich possible billionaire who owes a lot of money to a bank, and they're about to call in the thing, and he's just continually trying to get. I'll take the Cowboys and give you 35 points for $1.6 million. And he's just holding on.
I think it's because he's the most self-aware person on the planet, and he hates himself just as much as everyone else hates him.
Maybe I can get behind that. I can get behind that. Before we go, the one game we're going to talk about, Kansas City and Tampa Bay. It's at Tampa Bay. I really believe that the Buccaneers might pull off really might. I think they're going to win the game.
Really?
Yes.
I don't. And I think, they're going to continue to have an uphill climb to try and win that division. I think they'll easily make the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think they're going to win this game. I think Kansas City's too good. Now, at the same time, we've seen Kansas City have tiny little lulls mid to late season before
defensively particularly they can have a fall bar, and with all that talent on offense at Tampa Bay, I mean, they can put up a couple of touchdowns quickly on them, and then you end up in now if you're going to have a quarterback that ends up in predictable passing situations, Patrick Mahomes probably the guy you want. I think they could do that. My final question is, and I know I'm stretching this out longer, does Taysom Hill remain the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints? Because there's a school of thought that if they had a bye week, if there had been an off week, that they actually probably would have gone to Jameis Winston, but that they went to Hill because it was a shorter week. He's still more ensconced in that offense than Winston is, and they would like to get to the point where Winston is the starting quarterback and they can still use Hill in that sort of slash position. What are your thoughts? Because he looked pretty good as a starting quarterback.
He looked pretty good. There's no doubt about it. And they're playing at Denver. I don't know. It's hard for me to see them pulling him at this point in time. I was surprised they went with him, to tell you the truth. I thought they were going to go with Jameis Winston, but that could be the case. Taysom has, been there.
Yeah.
And
I heard a few people who are kind of in the know and talked to people there who said that, part of the decision, not the whole decision, but part of the decision was that Taysom's understanding or knowledge of the playbook, because he's been there for years,
Yes.
is much greater. The worry is, of course, when you use him as that slash, you're throwing a wrench into things that you don't get to do when he's the starting quarterback. So that maybe we'll see them both moving forward.
I would see that. I could see that possibly seeing both Hill and Winston on Sunday. That'd be interesting. But I think Hill's going to start. That's my thought, and I think Kansas City's going to win.
All right, boys, fun show. I guess then have we decided 10 o'clock on Monday morning?
10 a.m. So a 10 a.m. Eastern
Breakfast show.
Standard Time. Yeah. So Tom Marino, who just joined us, it'll be a 7 a.m. show on the West Coast, and we'll breakfast.
We'll preview the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game now for Tuesday night.
There you go. Breakfast with the boys.
All right. I like it. All right. For
AFR breakfast version.
JF, for Jeff Taylor and Mark Ferrera, I'm John Pelkey. The breakfast edition on Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, which is 3 o'clock last Wednesday out on the West Coast or something. Who the hell knows? I don't understand. Mark will explain it to all of you via social media a little bit later. Have a great balance of your holiday weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you Monday.